Dragon Quest, otherwise known originally in America as Dragon Warrior, is the legendary role-playing franchise created by Yuji Horii all the way back in 1986. There is literally nothing I can say about the franchise that hasn't already been said by practically everyone else on the internet. From its incredible comedic yet seriously gripping storytelling, masterfully orchestrated music, wonderfully whimsical and charming character design headed by the late legendary artist Akira Toriyama, Dragon Quest has something that appeals to everyone. When I was growing up, I fell in love with the role-playing genre, watching my characters grow more and more powerful over the course of each and every game I played. I couldn't get enough of it. Final Fantasy was always my go-to RPG franchise, but when I grew older and had my own money, one day I ended up purchasing a little title known as Dragon Quest VIII. I played the absolute stuffing out of Dragon Quest VIII, but I didn't truly fall in love with the franchise until Dragon Quest IX. I've always been an absolute sucker for RPGs that allow me to create my own unique character, and Dragon Quest IX was basically everything I wanted in a Dragon Quest game. So imagine how I felt when I was browsing the web one night and saw the trailer for the first time. Dragon Quest X, an MMORPG set in the legendary franchise. At the time it was announced, I was in the middle of college, and my first thought was that I couldn't wait for this to release. I had dabbled in Final Fantasy XI and XIV, but Dragon Quest X seemed much more my speed. Then the years passed by, and unfortunately, it never released in English. So like many of the English Dragon Quest fans, I moved on and forgot about Dragon Quest X.
Come on, Reggie, give us
Dragon Quest X.
How about this instead?
Then Dragon Quest XI released, and that masterpiece of a game fully rekindled my love for the series. It made my mind wander back to the mysterious Dragon Quest X. So one night, I did a bit of digging, and found that fans had picked up the torch for the rest of us. Over the years, I had forgotten about Dragon Quest X, but passionate fans in the community built tools that would allow anyone to fully experience Dragon Quest X in English, at least to an extent. So when I found all of this information, I jumped into setting up everything immediately, and now after playing Dragon Quest X for over 100 hours, what are my thoughts on it? Should you play Dragon Quest X? I mean, it's probably pretty obvious if I put 100 hours into the game, but let's talk about Dragon Quest X. Dragon Quest X, as I stated before, does take a little bit of legwork to get working in English, but there is an amazing site that has guides on how to get all of that set up step by step. It specifically sets up a completely free trial account that gets a ton of content to explore. If you want to purchase the game and subscribe, there is a guide on how to do that as well. So keep in mind that Dragon Quest X does have a free-to-play option, but at its heart, it is a monthly pay-to-play MMORPG like Final Fantasy XI or XIV. Once you've set up all that you need to get the game started, the first thing you'll do is create your character. Creating your character will have you create your human persona as well as your sibling. You'll have options between a small amount of different customization options for your face, hair color, eyes, and face, but it's nothing super in-depth like you'd see in newer, more modern MMORPGs. Once you customize your human character, you then have to name yourself, which you have to do in Japanese text. Best thing to do for this step is to create a name and then convert it to Japanese katakana or hiragana using an online tool, and then just match the text provided as best you can. Once you are satisfied with everything, you are then plopped into a very lengthy story prologue, which serves as the game's tutorial. I recommend playing this tutorial if it's the first time you've ever played, as it gives context story-wise to everything about Dragon Quest X, but you do have the option of skipping the prologue. The story of Dragon Quest X follows you and your sibling living in a small village. The village chief preordains that the village is doomed to death and that there will be only one survivor unless a task can be performed. Of course, you as the protagonist gets appointed this task with your sibling and friend.
Of course!
You are successful in retrieving the flower, but the village still ends up being destroyed with everyone, including you, dying, with the one survivor as foretold ending up being your sibling.
Whoa. Didn't see that coming.
From here, you are then reborn as one of the other 5 race choices. The races are the dwarves, elves, wetlings, poppets, and ogres. Once you choose a race, you are then able to customize it like you did with your human form. Once you are satisfied with your look, you then take the form of your choice, along with your choice of the 6 starting vocations. Yeah, if you are a big fan of the Dragon Quest series, many of the franchise's vocations return in Dragon Quest X, with many of them having to be unlocked via quests. The 6 starting vocations are Warrior, Mage, Priest, Thief, Minstrel, and Martial Artist. We'll talk more about the classes in a bit, but once you make your choice, you will watch a cutscene, and then the real game begins. From the first moment you get in-game from the tutorial, you'll probably notice that the game has a very cartoony art style, with some of the graphics also looking a bit outdated. The game is over 10 years old at this point, releasing all the way back in 2012. However, because of the cartoony pseudo-cel-shaded art style, the graphics have aged pretty well. The game also has a stellar soundtrack, sporting the franchise's signature orchestric themes, with my favorite probably being this game's battle theme. Getting back to the beginning gameplay, you will start off with an introductory quest that varies based on the race you chose, and once that is complete, you are free to wander the world of Dragon Quest X. DQ10 is an enormous world to explore, so it can be a bit daunting to even think of where to start. Your first goal should be completing the game's main storyline quests. DQ10, much like Final Fantasy XIV, has an extensive storyline that spans over the game's several different expansions. Each story has a plethora of quests to complete that will reward experience, items, and unlock different features you will need for your character. DQ10, much like other MMORPGs, has a ton of different things to engage in, but the main gameplay loops will be quests, exploration, combat, and side activities. Questing in DQ10 is your standard fare of generic tasks. Most quests will boil down to talking to an NPC, accepting the quest, defeating a specific enemy, or walking to a location, and then turning in the quest. Some quests are different though, potentially having the player solve a puzzle, fight a boss, or read the quest text to figure out where to go. But generally, most quests are just glorified fetch quests.
Oh my.
The storyline plays similar to the side quests, but if you like a single player type experience, the story plays basically like a single player Dragon Quest game, and the story in DQ10 is actually pretty damn good. Although I do have to admit that watching your character literally stand there and do nothing in almost every cutscene is pretty funny. Exploration is generally pretty rewarding in DQ10. Much like the normal franchise titles, you can find treasure chests, extra quests, crafting materials, or other little rewards by checking out your environments. Now, combat, man, I love the combat in this game. Now ask pretty much any MMORPG player around. Most will tell you that combat is going to be a tab target system like World of Warcraft, or an action combat system like New World. Dragon Quest X, however, has an active turn-based combat system like the older Final Fantasies. Combat starts by running into an enemy in DQ10, which brings your party into a battle zone. From here, you and your party will wait intervals of a few seconds between each action, and the speed of which you get your actions depends on your agility stats. More on stats in a bit. Actions in combat can include attacking with your weapon, casting a spell or ability, defending, swapping equipment, or using an item. There are so many options, and generally, unless it's a higher difficulty situation, you will mostly just be attacking or casting a spell. The beauty in this combat system, however, is how frantic yet organized it is. Combat is slower than other MMORPGs, but much like Final Fantasy XI, you can more accurately see what is happening, as well as react to specific mechanics in fights. Enemies will constantly attack you as you navigate your menus, trying to quickly think of a spell you want to cast, or as you react to something that is happening. Movement and positioning is also a major factor in combat. Specific enemies will use attacks that cover specific areas on the battlefield, and if you move away from that area, you can completely avoid the attack. Tanks can influence combat in a major way by pushing or standing in front of enemies. Depending on your weight stat, you can become harder to push and can more easily push enemies on the battlefield. As a tank, you can literally block in enemies from moving and attacking your fellow party members. Oh, and if that's not enough, DQ10 also brings back the coup de grace from Dragon Quest IX. Coup de graces are basically like limit breaks, where you will get a specific powerful action unique to your class over the course of combat.
That's a lot of damage.
I love this combat system. In truth, it's an evolution of Final Fantasy XI's slower, more methodical combat system. Now, all the options in combat are also determined by what class, weapon, and build you choose for your character. Progression in Dragon Quest X has a ton of different mechanics, but I'll try to give a quick summary. First up is your level and vocation. Any vocation you have unlocked can be swapped to from taverns once you unlock the ability to do so. Each vocation has their own separate level, meaning you can spend a ton of time leveling up each and every vocation to max level once you have them unlocked. That would take an enormous amount of time and dedication to do, because not only is the cap level 130, but DQ10 has quite a lot of classes to choose from. 23 in fact at the time of recording this video.
Guys, stop. You're giving me too many options. I'm only one man here.
The classes are Warrior, Priest, Mage, Martial Artist, Thief, Minstrel, Battlemaster, Paladin, Armamentalist, Ranger, Sage, Superstar, Monster Master, Item Master, Dancer, Fortune Teller, Druid, Gadabout, Deathmaster, Demon Swordsman, Pirate, Guardian, and Dragomancer. Each class is incredibly unique in their function in combat. For instance, a class like the Item Master specializes in specifically increasing the potency of using items in combat. They also get the ability to capture and tame specific monsters to use in combat, similar to the Monster Master. But that's not really the Item Master's true strength in my opinion. For example, things like healing herbs or magic waters that recover a menial amount of HP and MP become essentially major forms of recovery in an Item Master's hands. Then there is the Gadabout, a class that relies on incredibly random effects that happen in combat, like randomly stunning your opponent because you started dancing, or buffing your allies because you told a joke and made them laugh, or on the other hand, you can lose your turn because you dozed off. The classes in DQ10 are some of the most unique gameplay-wise I've seen in a while in an MMORPG, and all of them are relatively viable at endgame. With each level up, you are granted a small stat boost to your HP, MP, Strength, which determines your attack damage, Resilience, which determines your defense, Agility, which increases your dodge chance as well as your turn order, Deafness, which increases your critical strike chance, Charm and Style, which influences if monsters become infatuated with you, skipping their turn, Magical Mending and Might, which increases your spell healing or damage, and Weight, which determines your ability to push enemies or if they can push you. Beyond leveling, which will just increase stats and allow you to wear better equipment, there is also skill points you earn per level that can be spent in various skill paths that will increase your potency in specific weapons or unlock vocation-specific spells and abilities. Each vocation gets their own skill points, but you can unlock permanent stat boosts across all of your vocations if you spend skill points in their vocation-exclusive skill tree. Further customization comes from other systems like the Master Orb. The Master Orb allows you to augment different attributes for your spells and skills, as well as your gear, which can be improved via crafting or monster drops. Now, equipment in general in Dragon Quest X sort of reminds me of old school MapleStory's struggle for equipment. You see, equipment isn't actually easy to come by. You have to specifically farm certain monsters for a drop you are looking for, or you can buy it from other players via the auction house if you have bought the full version of the game. But that is only obtaining the base item. From there, you can further enhance your gear via synthesis or enchantment alchemy or crafting. There is a ton ton of different options for progression, which leads us into DQ10's other content, side activities. Now, typically big MMORPGs will have small minigames you can play and just waste time on, and DQ10 has a ton of different side activities. There is fishing, crafting professions, the casino, monster arena, PvP arena, mini medal collecting, treasure chest hunting, monster data collection, achievements, guilds. The list goes on and on. You can completely ignore most of the game's main content and do nothing but fishing or spending time in the casino if you want to.
You've got 20.
Hit me.
Peter, don't.
Hit me.
21.
Hit me.
Peter.
Hit me.
That's 30.
Hit me.
PvP does actually exist in Dragon Quest X, and even though it serves as more of a side activity you can take part in, you have tons of exclusive rewards to earn, unique content to play, and even specific PvP seasons that you can join. There just isn't any traditional PvP as we normally think of it, like being able to attack a random player out in the world, at least as far as I'm aware. The game just has so much to offer to players of all types, including those who are looking for endgame challenges. Believe it or not, DQ10 also has their fair share of raids and dungeon content. Most content is for parties of up to 4 players, but some of the harder challenges require 8 players. The big caveat here though is that many of the side activities and features here is locked behind the full game that you have to purchase. The trial free-to-play mode does offer a ton of content, but the game isn't fully free to play. To experience the full game, you have to first purchase the bundle pack, which requires a ton of setup as well, since you can't just purchase it via a normal English website. You have to go through Amazon Japan. Then once you've purchased the full game, you also have to have a monthly subscription. Luckily, as an American, the currency exchange is actually in our favor, with the full game only costing about $39, and with a month's worth of game time only running around 8 or 9. The game also has a cash shop where you can buy cosmetics and other goodies. There are some items that increase things like drops in specific dungeons or reroll stats on one specific piece of equipment, but these items are so incredibly specific, and the game showers you in tons of cosmetics and double XP items for free anyways. Cosmetics specifically are fun in the game because literally everything you find can be set as a cosmetic if you want to. So this is genuinely an example of a major MMO doing monetization fairly. Now, I'm sure there are some features I am missing or have yet to discover, but that's sort of the beauty of this game. Every time I play, I learn something new or find something else I like about it. Whether it's the story, a new gameplay feature, the multiplayer content, the amount of classes, combat, it's all just a relaxing, fun experience. But I can't deny that the absolute biggest drawback of Dragon Quest X to my audience will be that the game hasn't officially been localized. Sure, we have all these tools now that allow us to translate the menus in certain text, but the game is still largely in Japanese. The game requires quite a bit of setup, and obviously if you try to interact with something that hasn't been translated yet, then it's a bit hard to figure out what the game is trying to convey to you. Heck, the community is basically closed off to us as English players, and while sure there is tools that allow us to talk to Japanese players, it's a bit of a chore having to translate English to Japanese and then the response back to English. It makes me wish as a Dragon Quest fan that we got the game upon its release all those years ago. It would have been exciting to play the game during its launch, but I am glad that I've been able to experience the game now, even though it is a bit dated. Anyways, let's get to my final thoughts on Dragon Quest X. I think it goes without saying, but if you are a fan of the Dragon Quest series, then Dragon Quest X is obviously going to be for you. It has the same charm as the mainline games in the series, and it takes the best parts of those titles and sprinkles it into a very polished MMORPG setting. I normally don't care for stories in MMORPGs, but Dragon Quest X's storyline is actually pretty good. The prologue tutorial starts off with a major hook that kept me motivated to see what happened next in the storyline. The combat system is a different spin for an MMORPG, but honestly, it works so well here. The fact that combat can be just as hectic as, say, tab target games or action combat games says a lot for it. It's a perfect blend of turn-based strategy and active combat. The fact that you can play a lot of the game for free under the free trial mode is astounding. You literally get the base game and some of the first expansion completely for free to experience. If you are a full subscriber, then you get even more content to experience, basically 10 years worth, so there will always be something new to do. With there being 23 classes to choose from, tons of different weapons, and a plethora of progression systems, there is a ton of variety in the way you can play your character in combat. You would think with how the game's combat is turn-based, though, that customization would probably be more restrictive, but surprisingly, no. There is various ways that you can play each vocation or role. Like the other Square Enix MMORPGs, DQ10's monetization is actually pretty fair. The game has a very competitively cheaper game and subscription price, as well as virtually no pay-to-win in its cash shop. Lastly, the game has an incredibly timeless look and feel to it. Maybe it's because I'm a huge fan of Akira Toriyama, but graphically, DQ10 has aged very well, except for maybe some of the blurry textures on environments. Oh, and one last thing. The music is perfect. It has all the same quality of a mainline title, and the intro theme? It gets me pumped to go on an adventure every time I listen to it. As much as I love this game, there is always going to be one major factor that will turn people away. The game is not in English. It was never localized to other countries. Obviously, if you are able to read the Japanese language, that's no problem for you. But for the rest of us, we have to use these translation tools, as well as go through a ton of extra steps just to be able to even play the game. That alone, I know, is enough to completely turn away most players looking into DQ10. Besides the language barrier, the game is 10 years old, so graphically, while it's got a really great cartoony stylistic look, some of the textures and models do look a bit dated. This can probably be touched up with a graphical update sometime in the future, but it is worth mentioning. The controls are a bit awkward to get used to, and personally, I had to switch over to a controller. Basically, everything requires you to go through several different menus to get to it. Almost nothing has a quick shortcut button. Compare that to other MMORPGs on the market where just about every menu and function will have a dedicated key button for you to press and it brings it up immediately. The combat system, I will have to acknowledge, won't be for everyone. Heck, in certain social circles, you even mention turn-based combat and people will laugh at you. Lastly, because of the language barrier, the game basically requires you to have guides and external resources pulled up while you play. Shoot, to even really play with a community, you will have to join a specific English-speaking one that is available via the Discord channels that are recommended. Otherwise, trying to talk to people in-game will unfortunately be pretty tough, obviously. Sure, you can type text in English, but virtually all of the player base will be talking in Japanese. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that puts a bow on Dragon Quest X. It's such a shame that this game hasn't been released worldwide, because it is truly one of the best games out there that a lot of the world is missing out on. I do have to wonder though, would it really do well in other countries with some of its design? Maybe one day in the future we'll find out. Until then though, are you playing Dragon Quest X? Let me know down in the comment section below. Do you want to try playing it now because of this video? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support my content. Follow all my social media links in the description below, and hopefully I will see you next time.